Dane Calloway is a conspiracy theorist and a fraud. We need to call these cats out for what they are and who they are. We need to really think about how our information is being processed. And I'm not talking about how Dane processes information and has his viewers buy into his own con. I'm talking about the pillars on how to deconstruct his own conspiracy theories. These aren't facts. There's no evidence to support it. His mad assertions and assumptions on human history is absolutely foul. And if you are an undergrad or a college student, you can find most of the documentation on slavery through online databases such as Galileo. You can find online databases online, extensive research online, fact check the content creator. Don't be lazy and assume he's telling the truth, or that his information is certified. That is how YouTube scholars make their money. That is how white nationalists, storefront scholars, or other extremist groups poison the minds of viewers by giving out misleading material or sources. And the so-called evidence can easily be debunked by common sense and logic. I'll be going over some of his out of context and so-called proof of a Negro Aboriginal state here in America. Here's what I need you as the viewer to understand. And as a viewer, this is how I need you to think. Don't believe anything anyone says, including me. Fact check the people you listen to see if they are credible or not. I found this video online from this lady who goes by the name Know the Ledge, play on, I guess, on the word knowledge. And here's what she had to say, and this is something that I think we all should listen to.
Breaking news at 11, guys. So, you guys remember that video that I did yesterday when I said that these Aboriginal niggas are making me sick? Remember that first webpage that I went to when I said I wasn't reading it, and for good reason? That wasn't the webpage that I wanted to land on, and that's the reason why I didn't read it. However, I went back and actually read that page that I said I wasn't going to read because it piqued my interest or piqued my curiosity. So I'm reading this information and I'm copying and pasting passages into Google to verify the shit that he's saying. I would say a good 95% of that entire web page is plagiarized. That is why we cannot find sources on those web pages. Dane Calloway is a fraud, and he is passing off information as original thought that is not his own in a way to fraud and scam people out of YouTube donations. This is why you should always do research on the people that you are giving your money to. Nothing that Dane Calloway is saying is his thought, and since it is not his thought, it is not groundbreaking. Y'all really think that a nigga with a YouTube degree is out here doing all of this shit, and he is not. He is copying and pasting paragraphs from numerous websites, not citing them, not telling you where he's getting his sources from, in an effort to lie to y'all to make him appear to be some type of fucking Moses or something, leading his people out of a slumber when he is not. He is a liar and a scammer. So when I do have time today, because a bitch does have time today, I will be doing a video of me simply copying and pasting the passages from that web page into Google and finding the original page that it is coming from. So I just wanted to let y'all know that. I also left a comment on his YouTube letting him know that he is a fraud and he is plagiarizing. And by the way, Dane, I will be going around and telling each author one by one that you are plagiarizing their shit without sorting them so I can get your shit taken down, because what you are doing is dishonest and it cannot be trusted. You have committed an egregious act that is like one of the cardinal sins at places, at institutions of higher learning. You do not steal, because what you're doing is stealing. You do not steal people's shit and don't cite it. Do you know how many people's PhDs and masters have been snatched away from them when they've been exposed for plagiarizing shit? Do you know how fucking huge that is? That is a transgression, and you should be ashamed of yourself. I can't respect somebody like that. Nothing that he says can be trusted or assumed to be true until further notice. Let his ass know that. Somebody give him this fucking video, because I am on your head, Dane. You don't do shit like that.
Since I plugged her channel, go ahead and click the link below in the description box to support her content and support her channel. She's very knowledgeable and she has receipts for everything she said in that video. She has a whole video of her exploiting Dane, plagiarizing other people's websites. So all you gotta do is go to Dane's main website, copy and paste all the words on it, put it in a Google search engine, and you'll find it yourself. This isn't information only a select few of us can do. We all can do it. Now let me show you the African cultural transplant to show you where we truly come from and who our ancestors are.
With the arrival of slaves to America in the 17th century came the blending of many cultures.
There's a very thin line between the music of the slave and the music of the slave master. I've actually gone back and listened to old African chants that are actually note for note songs in America 200 years ago.
Many historians believe the modern-day banjo is most closely linked to the African lute instrument called the accounting.
It wasn't until the Gibson Company comes along and does the 5-string and the 5th string and the 3-finger Scruggs roll that we get it like it is today. But it was an instrument that came out of Africa.
After slavery, America entered into its Reconstruction period. As former slaves spread across the country, so did their music.
By the time slaves were freed, and then even later in the 1920s ex-slaves began to move north in mass numbers.
The division of hillbilly versus race was predicated simply and almost exclusively on a kind of racial hierarchy, that this belongs over here to the black folk, this belongs to the white folk.
String bands basically are the link between the really rural music that people were playing in their earliest days in this country and the later music that became known as country.
Dance is a language, and social dance is an expression that emerges from a community. A social dance isn't choreographed by any one person. It can't be traced to any one moment. Each dance has steps that everyone can agree on, but it's about the individual and their creative identity. Because of that, social dances bubble up, they change, and they spread like wildfire. They are as old as our remembered history. In African American social dances, we see over 200 years of how African and African American traditions influenced our history. The present always contains the past, and the past shapes who we are and who we will be. The Juba dance was born from enslaved Africans' experience on the plantation. Brought to the Americas stripped of a common spoken language, this dance was a way for enslaved Africans to remember where they're from. It may have looked something like this. Slapping thighs, shuffling feet, and patting hands. This was how they got around the slave owner's ban on drumming. Improvising complex rhythms, just like ancestors did with drums in Haiti or in the Yoruba communities of West Africa. It was about keeping cultural traditions alive and retaining a sense of inner freedom under captivity. It was the same subversive spirit that created this dance, the cakewalk. A dance that parodied the mannerisms of Southern high society, a way for the enslaved to throw shade at the masters. The crazy thing about this dance is that the cakewalk was performed for the masters, who never suspected they were being made fun of. Now you might recognize this one. 1920s, the Charleston. The Charleston was all about improvisation and musicality, making its way into Lindy Hop, swing dancing, and even the Kid and Play, originally called the Funky Charleston. Started by a tight-knit black community near Charleston, South Carolina, The Charleston permeated dance halls where young women suddenly had the freedom to kick their heels and move their legs. Now, social dance is about community and connection. If you knew the steps, it meant you belonged to a group. But what if it becomes a worldwide craze? Enter the twist. It's no surprise that the twist can be traced back to the 19th century, brought to America from the Congo during slavery. But in the late 50s, right before the Civil Rights Movement, the twist is popularized by Chubby Checker and Dick Clark. Suddenly, everybody's doing the twist. White teenagers, kids in Latin America, making its way into songs and movies. Through social dance, the boundaries between groups become blurred. The story continues in the 1980s and 90s. Along with the emergence of hip-hop, African-American social dance took on even more visibility, borrowing from its long past, shaping culture and being shaped by it. Today, these dances continue to evolve, grow, and spread. Why do we dance? To move, to let loose, to express. Why do we dance together? To heal, to remember, to say, we speak a common language. We exist and we are free.
What is this shit? Black people don't dance like this. No offense to Native Americans, but what the fuck is this? Y'all really think y'all this? Y'all fucking insane. Saying us, man. Come on now. This more like it, guys. The information is there. The sources are real. See, a lot of you Dane viewers don't want to read these sources. You want somebody to tell you your own history without actually checking this to verify whether this history is true. Look, the Black Seminoles, the name Seminole itself comes from the Creek word runaway. That should let you know right there that something, you guys ain't reading shit. I want y'all illiterate motherfuckers to read. Reading is important. You have to verify your sources. You have to know where your sources come from. I'm giving you these sources. This proves how African we truly are. The Gullah Geechee, all that shit, that's all Africans. They're runaways. They're slaves that got away. Don't base things off of feelings or visual aids. Visual aids may help, and people that may speak the truth help, but Dane's not one of them. Dane's not giving you good information. Look at this information right here. Read, niggas. Read. We didn't go through slavery for them to keep us from reading, for y'all now not to know how to fucking read now. You Dane viewers need to stop being illiterate. Stop it. You setting us all back with your stupidity. And I'm not saying that white people don't have the same problem either, because white nationalists and the whole white fairy tale shit, all that's bullshit. There's mass delusion going on both sides, because people who don't want to educate themselves are the easiest ones to get manipulated. Now, do your best here and read all this information I'm giving to you. Don't just listen to what I'm saying. Read everything that I put in here, because I'm giving you sources. I'm not giving you shadow sources like Dane is. I'm citing my shit. This is how it's done. And coming from unnamed sources, unnamed people, voice over Pete and paid off actors. This is real information. This is scholarly information. This is something that somebody had studied, had put his life work and investment into. This is real information. This is real documentation that this man is putting forth in this article that I'm giving you. Read it. And in the past, I would have some commenters, because I usually make videos without narration, and they'd be like, I don't want to read all this shit. This is why. This is why some of you are as dumb as you are, because you're just listening to what anybody tells you without fact checking what they're saying. You're no different than the people who watch Fox News. You're not Native American. It's actually an embarrassment that I'm making this video. That I'm really making this video. Everyone who believes this shit's making black people look bad. Sometimes I wonder if this was actually modeled off of the Eurocentric model for Native Americans. Because back in the day, you had white people claiming Native Americans as being white. I wonder if We Ain't African movement started or was based off of that. Because let me break it down to you. This whole We Ain't African movement started back when social media started popping. Back in, I think, 2011, 2012 is when this started. A lot of the people that started this movement, We Ain't African movement, a lot of them are money hustlers. They're just trying to get money off of you. At the height of social media, black people, we like trends. So when something's trending, when something we hear sounds, you got some of us who want to disconnect from that African history, that African heritage. And we hear something like that, and we hear somebody, oh, he got this documentation that nobody's seen, and we just fall for it. I should use the term we very loosely, but white people claim Native Americans too, usually for political reasons. Like Elizabeth Warren, for instance, she wants to appeal to minorities. She'll claim a Native American ancestry. I mean, white people do it for their own insidious reasons as well. It's not just black people. But I cannot stress this enough. Most of you so-called followers of these movements, learn how to fucking read. Read, bitch. Don't let these people fool you into thinking they have valuable information or secret information. What is Dane's methodology? How does he get to his conclusions? How does he get to trace people's ancestry or Native American ancestry? He doesn't show you. I believe Dane is actually manipulating some of these so-called documents. And I'm going to show you why I think that's the case in my next video. Now here's why I think these movements spread, or how they spread. They spread like wildfire. Remember those dance crazes, like every year people will be coming out with a new dance. It's ironic how these whole We Ain't African movements built steam during the height of social media, like I had mentioned earlier. It's quite easy. Let's say I wanted to make a channel claiming we black Americans were originally from Japan, and I can't base that information off of one black samurai. So I have to somehow manipulate my sources and somehow make it seem as if the Japanese weren't actually samurais. That we can't prove that they were samurais because there's not enough documentation on samurai swords. But we have this one black Japanese person, and we're going to make him the proof that we're all samurais originally, and that most of our ancestors come from Japan. See how stupid that is? Copper skin can easily be debunked off this alone. Native Americans were known as red-skinned or red men. Copper is a reddish-brown color. When the Europeans referred to us originally, we were just Negro or Negroes, Spanish word for black. That is a clear distinction between red and black. And obviously over time these words became offensive and derogative for both groups. Even though African Americans have various different skin tones, these were of the basic varieties. For early American settlers to easily identify different ethnic groups of people, they used these terms. Dane doesn't want you to understand or acknowledge these terms because he doesn't want you to actually go that far back in history to identify these terms and the usages of these terms. We're going to go ahead and go over the whole voiceover Pete. Dane was caught paying somebody to basically pass his agenda, some white guy. That's ironic as hell, but we're gonna go over here and I'm gonna show you guys how to think as the viewer when you are giving misleading information or false information.
Hello, I'm William Attlee and this is a news brief with truth.
We're gonna stop the video here. Why is this breaking news? Like, why?
See the men on the screen. They are the ancestors of the African American, but there is a problem.
Where is the channel logo? What news network is this? Who are these newscasters?
Their true identity. Thomas McNeely has the story.
Thomas McNeely does not exist. This is voiceover Pete from Fiverr. You could literally pay him $5 or more for him to literally say anything you want him to say. He is not he's not a source of information, a valid source of information. Yet Dane's over here. He still can be found on Dane's channel and Dane's videos, and Dane's passing him off as a verifiable source of information when he's a fraud. He's a fake. He'll say anything you want him to. Google Thomas McNeely. He does not exist. Promise you.
Deeply divided due to the tagline, African Americans ain't Africans, which can be found in numerous places on the web. Now, it should be obvious as to why it's causing a commotion, but if it escapes you, let me explain. The current American education states African Americans were brought
This sounds
to
fake.
America
No
as
newscaster
slaves
would
in
talk
Africa.
like this. No newscaster would ever talk like this.
They are American indigenous, not descendants of Africans. As they say, the truth is stranger than fiction. Although this fact isn't spoken of openly, it's not a secret. However,
Why is Dane so
programming
obsessed
such
with
as
white
Roots,
people
12
for
Years
information and
Slave,
sources? Have you ever
The
noticed that while
African
watching some of his
Story, even
videos?
Book of Negroes,
I'll get into that with the next.
wonder why so many African Americans are confused. We won't address all the misleading DNA tests being provided to connect African Americans to Africa.
Sounds like Dane,
So,
talks like
the
Dane.
argument
This
is,
shit was literally written
do
by
they
Dane.
continue identifying
There's
as
literally
African
no
Americans,
DNA
which is
evidence
a
that
fake
connects us to
identity
Native
for them,
Americans.
or
None
embrace
whatsoever.
being
That's a lie on
identified
itself.
as indigenous Americans.
Are there any consequences of choosing one identity over the other?
William, that's a good question. According to African Americans Ain't Africans Facebook forum, identifying as African American is to quietly relinquish ancestral connections to America, connections that go back hundreds of thousands of years. A curious story, but one appropriate for February, which is Black History Month in the United States.
As you watch any video, make sure you verify in that way. Ask yourself, where is he getting this information from? Ask yourself, is he citing this information? Is he giving you a direct link to where he's getting it from? Because as an academic person, as a scholar, as somebody who claims to be a historian, you always have to cite your sources. You always got to show where you get your information from. Dane doesn't do that. And that's why he's so manipulative. There's a lot of holes in how Dane conducts his research. He has a lot of shadow sources, unreliable sources, and flat out, at times, no sources. Dane is essentially an occult upon himself. Dane is the Milli Vanilli of information. I happen to catch on to things like this easy because I was taught, when you're in school, you're taught, especially in higher learning, you're taught to know, you gotta know where shit comes from. You just can't say shit and not put something out. Like, you gotta have some type of evidence. Dane just says shit, and he expects you as the viewer to just accept it. You're supposed to accept what he says because what he's saying is the word. He is above everyone. He's knowledgeable more than anybody, even though he doesn't really fucking show it. We need to stop with this nonsense. Native Americans have been through enough. We have been through enough. We don't need to be culture vultures to Native American culture. We need to stop listening to people like Dane Calloway, or we would end up like the black people who followed Jim Jones and committed mass suicide. You're committing suicide in your brain, in your mind, and you're allowing people like Dane to re-enslave you through this bullshit. He is getting money off of you. That is it. It's pretty obvious he's a fraud, and that he gets money from his own con, his own scam. And don't think he's the only one neither. There's a whole We Ain't African movement, and it's all started by these con artists. They all conning you. They all playing you like the dummies you are. Be smart. Educate yourself the right way. Not peep game. Don't listen to these wannabe aboriginal niggas, cause they setting you up for fucking failure. And they really making us look bad. They're making all black people look bad. Like, they have no fucking shame. They have no fucking shame, and it shows. I know some of y'all didn't go to school, or were self-hating to begin with, who needed an identity to cling on to. And my problem is with the viewers who think this way. Our history didn't start with slavery, and what we were able to do, despite all the odds, is remarkable. We are the engineers of the culture here in the Americas. We innovated even when we were oppressed and suppressed. There's nothing wrong with where we come from. But if we start denying who we are and where we come from, we deny our entire existence and what makes us unique and special. And I cannot allow that to happen. And I can allow sick, money-hungry, scheming motherfuckers to disrupt who we are and rebrand, distort our history so they can make money off the weak-minded and vulnerable-minded individuals. All you sheepish Dane Calloway followers sound the same. Well, you can't prove his information is incorrect. When has Dane ever shown he was able to trace us back to Native Americans? What is his methodology? How does he do it? He never shows any proof of those things. His sources are misleading as hell. His information is false. And there is no way of knowing if any of his information is even valid because you cannot pinpoint where the hell he even got his information from in the first place. When a man has to tell you to research his research, to research that research, he is lying about his own research. Research doesn't work like that. He's just telling you, trying to confuse you, to think that he's the only one able to come up with his research. That he's the only one able to do it. That is a fraud. Only a fraud will say some shit like that. So I'm going to go ahead and examine this whole documentation method that I believe he's trying to use in the next video, and I'm going to exploit it because I think I understand now what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's not hard to tell. So peace to all y'all.